the title is Broad Match Many Impressions, Phrase Match Zero Impressions. And this is very important for us to understand that going into phrase match from broad match, it's a different beast. It's a different beast, and you have to understand that you will get less impressions. How's it going, everybody? Gene Villanos here, another episode of the PPC Cave. Today, it is episode 109th episode. But before we get into it, I want to talk about our sponsors, Opteo. Opteo has been with us for a long time now. Not long time now. I don't know how many long time now. And they're the best PPC management tool out there. Not only for Google Ads, but also for LinkedIn, Meta, TikTok, Microsoft, and they just make things simple. And I think as a Google Ads manager, PPC manager, you want to make things simple. You want to be able to have everything in one place. You could create campaigns, you could create copy, you can optimize, you can ask AI to break down performance, you can see how your landing pages are doing, you can do so much, you can audit accounts, you can do all that in Opteo. And for us, it's all you have to do is just jump on www.opteo.com/theppccave. Let them know on the chat box that you heard about Opteo from the PPC Cave, and they'll upgrade your regular 14-day trial to a 28-day trial, almost 30 days for free. And if you need help setting it up, let me know and I'll do it for free for you. So today is episode 109, broad versus phrase match, which is better? And of course, this is something that I've kind of come across with lately as I've been getting more lead generation clients. And as I get more lead generation clients, it's important for us to understand which tool in the bag we're going to use, which one we're going to go with. And phrase, as we know, to define it, is something that has quotes in it. You know, let's just say men's basketball shoes. That's 3 phrases, men's basketball shoes. I put those in quotes. Then theoretically, what Google should be giving me is search terms that have men's basketball shoes in it. But we all know that's not the case. They're going to, provide different variants to that. But that's in theory what phrase match is. Now, broad, on the other side of that is if you say basketball shoes, it could literally give you specific brands. It could give you Adidas basketball shoes, Nike basketball shoes. It could give you women's basketball shoes, kids basketball shoes, all these different things. Just because there's no bracket, it's essentially just giving you a category, and then Google's going to do its thing, quote unquote, and give you all these different types of keywords. And the one thing that you can distinguish between phrase and broad, aside from having quotes and not having quotes, is essentially how encompassing broad would be. To have keywords that are just broad, you're going to get a hodgepodge of all different types of things. But phrase is supposed to be a little bit more niche. It's supposed to be a little bit more tamed and have more parameters of what you're actually trying to, or what is actually being shown on Google Ads for your account. So, that's kind of the background of both broad and phrase. And, understanding the difference between the two is super important, just because if you're creating a search campaign and you only perhaps have a limited budget and you're trying to go phrase, well, maybe phrase is going to be a little bit more expensive and your cost per click is going to be a little higher, just because it's going to be, more constricted in regards to what type of traffic will flow if you have a phrase keyword in the mix of your campaigns. So I got this question just because, or I got this, not question, but topic from a question on Reddit. And as you know, we love to do Reddit just because Reddit questions really make us relevant, and we understand that if we, are not relevant and we're beginning to kind of be out of touch, I think it just makes the podcast less valuable. So Reddit kind of keeps us buckled in, keeps our ear to the ground to understand that these are the problems people are facing 6 hours ago, not a year ago, or whatever it may be. It's relevant is what I'm trying to say. So if you are on just regular Spotify or Apple Podcasts, I suggest you get on Spotify video or YouTube, because I'm going to show the Reddit question right now. Broad match many impressions versus phrase match zero impressions. So I'm just going to read it real quick. Is it normal to have very low impressions for phrase match campaigns? I was getting good conversions with broad match, but as soon as I set my keywords to phrase match, I simply get nothing. These are keywords such as service near me, in quotes again, service city. I bump budget up to from 100 to 200 a day and to see if it does anything. But even then, I had a strange behavior take place when it was in broad match. I would target a wide area of 58 zip codes, and out of 100 daily impressions, I would get 60 in one lower income zip code and 40 in another and 0 in all the other zip codes. My conclusion is that perhaps this niche is competitive and Google is not showing my ads in the desirable zip codes, and also that there's not enough demand for the service to serve the ads at a phrase match level. Of course, I might be wrong in my conclusion, which is the purpose of this thread. Okay, yeah, I mean, that is a valid, question. When you change broad match into phrase match, the title is broad match many impressions, phrase match zero impressions. And this is very important for us to understand that when you're going into broad match from, or going into phrase match from broad match, it's a different beast. It's a different beast. And you have to understand that you will get less impressions. If you're getting more impressions, then I think there's something very wrong with the setup there. It just is bizarre if you're going from broad and then going to phrase and you're getting more impressions. The whole thing about broad and phrase is just the exclusivity of phrase compared to broad. Just because there's going to be less keywords, you're going to have just a specific type of keyword that you want to show for, and it's not going to be as prevalent, and it's not prevalent. It's not going to be as flowing as broad. So I think it's just super important for us to understand that if we're going from broad to phrase, expect that we're going to get less impressions. Or if we're going from broad to exact, obviously the hierarchy is the lowest rung of the ladder is broad, then phrase, then exact. So you're going from very non-restrictive, flowy, anything goes with broad. Mid-tier with phrase, you have 2, 3, 4, 5 different keywords that you want, but you could still bring random keywords in. And then the most constricted is at the top of the food chain would be exact, where you only want these keywords in a search. So I think it's expected that impressions will decrease. And most of the times, if you're beginning, you kind of have these questions and you kind of want to test things. And I feel bad for this guy because he said he was getting good conversions with broad. If you're getting good conversions with broad, then why did you stop it? You just kind of like shot yourself in the foot, just because sometimes it's hard to go back when things are dialed in like that. But yeah, phrase match is definitely, I believe, killing your impressions, just because you've dramatically reduced your search query coverage. And then broad, with that signal, Google is saying, okay, I can explore, I can bring in this type of keyword, this type of searcher, this type of search journey. But with phrase, it gets super strict, so now only seeing some very close variants instead of just all the variants in the past, that probably really drove the volume down when you switch from broad to phrase. And then you're to ask the question, broad versus phrase match, which is better? And it really depends. If you have a low budget or lower budget, you've looked at lost impression share due to budget, and you see it's very high, and you're not entering auctions just because you're not eligible because your budget is too low, then you should probably stick with broad. You probably have to go with a phrase match or a broad match keyword instead of a phrase match keyword because of the type of budget that you have. And of course, if you have a higher budget, then you could probably even go all the way up to exact, and of course have phrase in it. But does it mean that phrase match is going to be better for you. And for instance, there are sometimes or best practices from both a lead gen and e-commerce perspective that you believe is going to work perfectly, and then you get to that point and you're like, wow, I'm too constricted. I've tried to build out a bestseller list. I've tried to do some things where, go off maybe the services you get a lot of leads on, or you have e-commerce website, you have bestseller, but it's not converting on Google Ads, it's not translating. At that point in time, you can't continue to use phrase match if you spent a lot of your budget on phrase match and get zero conversion. Sometimes it's important for us to test broad just because there are some things that we don't know. A lot of Google Ads is you don't know what you don't know. And for us to test what we do know, or for us to test, then we do know things. Sometimes we have to work backwards instead of just trying to guess and say, no, this keyword is going to work. So I'm going all in, making it phrase, making it exact. Sometimes having that broad match in there will help us get an idea of what we need to actually test. So that is one, thing. It really depends if you think phrase is going to win out every time just because you have a set amount of keywords or these set keywords that should show up every time. You're sadly mistaken, just because if we knew that, then we would go automatically to exact, and exact would work every time, and that's not the case. I think it's really important to understand that's why we have three different types of keywords: broad, phrase, and exact, because you want to be able to pull that in or pull that out of your bag at any point in time, just because you're going to have different clients with different budgets. You're going to see there might be even like a specific competitor that's just really hammering in a phrase match keyword. Maybe going broad, you could see more of the blind spots that you could play in, that it's not so expensive, where the average cost per click is manageable, just because I would rather pay for 20 plus clicks than 5 clicks and then just it'd be phrase and exact, just because I know that this in general is a volume game. To say, okay, 5 out of 5 clicks will yield 5 different conversions, that's so unlikely. I've seen that happen every time, where a client has an exact or phrase match keyword, and it's just not converting, even though it's the exact thing that we're trying to show up for. But that doesn't matter. It's really about the volume. It's really about how many times, also along with the quality of keyword. It's those two metrics. There's those two things, and it's just, that's what makes Google Ads difficult, because you can do things on paper, but if you don't test it and get the result that you want, it doesn't necessarily work the way that you envision it, right? So that's essentially my take is, when you do that, you're really constricting a lot of your impressions and clicks, and then maybe conversions down the road, and it can be very difficult to come back from that, especially if you were performing well with with a broad match keyword campaign, and then you switched it to phrase. And most of the time, try to switch it back, and maybe it'll work, maybe it won't, but you just have to test that also. And he actually asked 2 questions, or had 2 parts. So about the lower income zip codes, he's saying that I had strange behavior when it went abroad. I would target a wide area of 58 zip codes, and out of 100 daily impressions, I would get 60 in one lower income zip code and 40 in another. So if you're only trying to, so that's the thing with broad, or that's the thing with Google Ads in general. You can't say just because I added all these zip codes, then it's gonna, I want the best, or I want the absolute top, zip codes where it's just affluent, not low income neighborhoods. It's very hard to do that, just because one, you're going to have competitors bidding higher on that for sure. So if your budget is already low, or maybe even if your quality score of your ads or your keywords or your landing page aren't as high, best believe anyone that's targeting a high premium zip code, there's going to be more people targeting that on Google Ads than lower income. So therefore, it's going to be harder for you. You got to have everything legit, everything dialed in. So I can see why the impressions dropped for you on that end. But yeah, I think it's important to understand also that bid strategy helps a lot. You could have broad and and phrase match. But what's the point of even changing it to phrase match or broad, or even doing anything with your keywords if you're on automated bid strategy? If you're on automated bid strategy, anything that's gotten conversions in the past, depending on that bid strategy, or clicks, things like that, it's just going to show that same keyword over and over again, and it'll stick you in a loop. So that's why for me, like, most of my search campaigns are going to be manual, so that I could evenly rotate those keywords, either just like on a weekly level, or just if I want to test, so that I could utilize different broad match, phrase match, exact match. Because if you're on an automated bid strategy, it's just going to pick whatever has gotten the most clicks and conversions, and that necessarily isn't your goal every time. Maybe it is if it's dialed in, but like I said before, Google Ads is usually the answer is you don't know what you don't know. So if you're going in, diving into something that you believe is going to work for you, but haven't had a chance to actually test all those different keywords and phrase, broad, exact match type keywords, then you're really kind of shooting yourself in the foot, because you're not getting the most accurate data. So with manual, you have a lot more levers that you could pull up and down, and rotate those keywords evenly, so that okay, I have 100 spend on all these keywords. This is out of just 100 spend. I know which keyword does the best with a 100 spend budget. Now let's go to 200, evenly rotate by cost. So I like to do that. And the fact that you mentioned zip codes, if you really want to target zip codes and not target zip codes, you would ditch the automated bid strategy and go straight to manual. Increase the bid for the bid adjustment for the locations that have higher, more premium zip codes, and then lower the ones that are more low income, so that you're trying to really spend more where you want to. But yeah, that's broad versus phrase match, which is better. Guys, if you have any questions, please email us, theppccave@gmail.com.